a lot of familiar faces. How's it going, guys? Thank you so much for being with me today. My name is Jesus Ramirez. So I see Stephanie, Cindy, Gal, Sam, Aurora, Robin, John, Claudia, Tim, as always, of course, Kendall, Lois. How's everyone doing today? Thank you so much for being here. This is going to be the Daily Creative Challenge number 8. And we have a whole bunch to cover today. Let me just quickly get started by showing you this page, which you probably have seen already if you've been following along with me for the entire challenge. If you go into behance.net/challenge/Photoshop, you'll get into this page where you can scroll down all the way to the bottom and you'll see the different boxes here that contain all the different challenges that we've done so far. If you miss one, you can click on the watch video button and follow along. But the important one is this one here titled Make a Composite. And you have to download the images that we're going to use, and they're found under the Get Started button, this white button here. You can click on it and that will open up a page, and it has a downloadable PSD that will contain all the layers that we're going to use for today's stream. So it's very important that you guys go there and download that PSD if you want to follow along. So we're going to make a shoe composite today, and after you work on this project, you need to make sure that you go on that page right there. That's the that URL right there, and that's our Discord page where you can go into the current challenge tab and submit the work that you completed while following along with me or watching the recording. And you can see that people are submitting a whole bunch of great work, including the Lion King text effect, this really cool color grading image that we worked on yesterday's challenge. So it's a whole bunch of cool stuff that you can come in here and ask questions if you have them. Myself or one of the Adobe mentors like Claudia, Sam, Tim, or Voodoo Val may answer them for you, or one of the people watching can also give you an answer if they know it. But it's a great place to be. It's somewhere where we can all share and learn from each other. So I highly recommend it. Check it out. Before we get started today, again, I just want to make sure that everyone downloads the PSD. So make sure that you go into the behance.net/challenge/Photoshop page and download the Get Started PSD from the Make a Composite tab. You'll recognize it because it has today's date, Thursday, August 1st, 2019. Happy August 1st, everyone. Can't believe it is August already. So let's get started with the video. Actually, one thing I want to mention, we're going to work on a shoe composite project, and I just wanted to throw out a quick little shout out to a good friend of mine. His name is Seth McCullough, and he is a professional retoucher, and he works on retouching projects for Nike. So he does a lot of cool work for Nike. So you might want to check out his page and see the type of compositing that he does with shoes. And I know that he also has training, high-end training on this type of work. If you really want to get into this type of product retouching, Seth is a good guy to learn from. He's really good, as you can see from his portfolio. So you might want to check him out. I'll copy the link of his Behance and I'll put it on the chat so you guys could check him out and follow him. He's pretty good at what he does. So we're gonna be working on something much simpler than one of these Nike projects, but the idea is gonna be very similar. So at this point, everybody should have downloaded the the Photoshop file that is found under the behance.net/challenge/Photoshop page. This one here. So let me just take a look at the chat to make sure that we're all doing all right. It looks like everybody is doing well. Happy August 1st, Gal. Hey Sam, hey Claudia, how's everybody doing? Good. It looks like we don't have any questions, so we're gonna get started. So the PSD that you downloaded should look a lot like this. Yours will have watermarks from Adobe Stock. They're Adobe Stock images. You can license them if you want to use them. If you want to use a full resolution version, or you can just practice with the watermark versions, that's totally fine. I don't have the watermark versions. I've actually licensed the image, so that's what you see on screen. But again, it's totally okay to follow with the watermark versions and license them if you want to, or you can use your own images. And one of the reasons that I chose this shoe image from Adobe stock is because it's not very fancy. It wasn't really shot in a white background or anything like that. It was just a shoe on the floor. So I just wanted you guys to see that you could take a photo of your shoe in a different angle, maybe just up against the floor, and then you can work with it if you want to. So this is what we're gonna do in this stream. So what I'm going to do is first disable all the other layers just so that we can work with the shoe layer. And we're going to start by isolating the shoe. We want to remove the background from it. As you guys probably have already seen in the previous challenges, one of the ways that I like making selections is by using the quick selection tool and letting our good friend Adobe Sensei, Adobe's artificial intelligence, use machine learning technology to select what we want to select. So I'm just going to click on select subject. Photoshop will analyze the image and make a selection out of whatever it thinks it's the main subject, in this case, the shoe. And it does a fairly good job. It's never going to be perfect, but you can always add or subtract to the selection. So one thing that you can do is just click and drag to select this white from the shoe and just make sure that everything is selected. Sometimes it's easier to see your selection by pressing the Q key on the keyboard, and that will get you into the quick mask mode. So everything in red will not be selected, and everything that it's in its original color will be selected. So then I can zoom in and you can see areas like here that the selection didn't do that good of a job. So I can just paint with a brush, and I have a very a small brush with a hard edge, and I'm painting with black to hide these pixels from the selection. So these pixels are not going to be selected. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time with fine-tuning the selection. I've mentioned it in previous streams that it's not a good idea to spend a whole lot of time fine-tuning. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't get too much of the floor on my selection, and we can do all the fine-tuning later. So I'm just painting, clicking and dragging. You could also click once, hold shift, and click again, and Photoshop will draw a straight line in between the 2 points. So that's something else that you can do if you like. So I'm just quickly panning through the image. I'm holding the space bar and clicking and dragging to pan across the image. And overall, it looks very good. I'm just going to make a few more adjustments there, and that's good enough. When you're done, all you need to do is press the Q key on the keyboard, and there it is. Again, you can always come back and fine-tune the selection. I just double-clicked on the hand tool to fit the image to screen, and what I'm going to do now is simply click on the layer mask icon to create a layer mask that will hide the background from the foreground. So now we have an isolated shoe, which is what we want. And you can right-click on the layer and convert it to a smart object, because we want to work with this layer as a single layer, but we also want to be able to go inside and make adjustments later to fine-tune the shoe. And what you need to do is simply enable the background at this point, just so that you can see what we got. And we're going to make a couple adjustments to the shoe. We're trying to make the shoe stand out more. So I'm going to go into Filter, Camera, Raw, Filter, and I'm just going to make a few adjustments. So I'm going to maybe increase the exposure to brighten up the image, reduce the highlights to give a little more detail in the highlights, and increase the shadows to add more detail in the shadows. So we're getting more of the inside of the shoe, more of the detail here. And I'm going to click and drag to the right to increase the texture. So we make the shoe stand out just a little bit more. And the clarity, which is contrast in the midtones. Again, try to make those details in that texture pop and stand out. And I'm going to increase the vibrance, which adds saturation. And the difference between vibrance and saturation is that saturation increases the saturation of all pixels equally, while vibrance protects already saturated skin tones and, already saturated pixels and skin tones. So it does a really good job. I'm also going to go into the detail slider tab, and I'm going to increase sharpening. Here's a quick trick with the sharpening tab, if you hold Alt or Option on the Mac as you click and drag, you remove the color and it makes it easier to see the effect that you're applying. Also, if you don't want to apply the effect to the entire layer, you can hold Alt, Option on the Mac, and click and drag on the layer mask, on the masking slider, excuse me. And notice that when I do that, you see that the masking slider is completely white. White reveals, black conceals. White is over the entire shoe, so it's going to apply the effect to the entire shoe. If I click and drag to the right, then it won't apply the effect to the areas that are in black. You don't really need that in this case, but I wanted to show you that trick in case you needed it in other projects. So what I'm going to do now is simply press OK. And we have our shoe. If I click on this icon, you can see the before and the after. After applying these effects, you're going to notice that some imperfections are going to pop up. So what we're going to do now is use basically the same technique that we used in a previous challenge on removing distracting elements from a photo. If you remember that, we used a quick selection, not the quick selection tool, the spot healing brush tool. We use a spot healing brush tool to remove imperfections from a photo. And what we're going to do is double click on the icon of the smart object. And that's going to bring up the smart object that we put in. It's going to open up a new tab, and it's going to open up the smart object that we converted in the beginning of the video, which was the layer that contains the layer mask. And what I can do now is create a adjustment layer that just increases the luminosity, just so that I can really see the details in the shoe. And then I can create a layer above the shoe, and I can just paint in away those imperfections. So notice how I'm just painting in these little tiny white dots that you see, which are way more noticeable when you apply the camera raw filter. So I'm just removing all these little imperfections. So this is basic product retouching, just removing all the tiny little imperfections that the product has, try to make the product look its best. And I'm just clicking and dragging, and obviously this is one of those things that takes quite a while, but I'm going fairly quickly here for the purposes of this tutorial, but you get the idea. You can see the before and the after. See that? See how I'm removing those tiny little dots? So then I can disable the levels adjustment layer, close this tab and save it, and Photoshop will update the camera raw filter on that layer. So it's a really, really cool technique to use smart objects, apply filters, and then make changes to the contents of the smart object if you need to. So this is what my shoe is looking like so far. I want my shoe to be in a black background, so I just used a solid fill layer as a background, so I can make it black if I need to, and then I can adjust the mask if necessary. I'm not going to worry about that, but I'm just going to make the background black. What I'm going to do now is enable this background layer, and I just want to give this background layer a little bit of reduce the opacity, and I want to blend it with the background. But before I do that, I'm going to select it and press Ctrl-T, Command-T on the Mac, and click and drag on the corner handles to scale it up. And then I'm just going to reduce the opacity way down to maybe to where it's barely noticeable, like at 7%. We'll just leave it at 10. We'll just say 10 is good. So that's going to be our background. So we have a background that is barely noticeable. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take a duplicate of that shoe layer by pressing Ctrl-J, Command-J on the Mac, and we're going to apply a filter that's going to make it seem like there's a bunch of light and speed and all this like cool light coming out of the shoe. And we're going to do that with the duplicate layer by right-clicking on it and rasterizing it. Then I'm going to go into Filter, Blur Gallery, Path Blur. And I can set my start point on the tip of the shoe and the point with the arrow right back here. And I can just increase the speed like so and adjust the endpoint if I need to. I don't think I need to go too far with this. I think that might be good. And this is looking fairly good. I think I'm happy with this. So this is the effect that we want. If you want to get fancy, you can start turning the blur. But for this case, I'm just going to keep a straight blur, and I can rotate it later if I need to, distort it later if I need to. So this is going to be good. I'm just going to press OK, and there it is. What I'm going to do now is take this layer and press Ctrl J, Command J on the Mac, duplicate it, and change the blending mode to color dodge. And now I have that effect that you see there. If I want a stronger effect, I'll duplicate that layer again, Ctrl J, and it creates a stronger effect. If you want to minimize the highlight, the light, just bring down the fill opacity. Not the opacity, the fill opacity. It'll give you different results if you use opacity and fill with this blending mode. And to make it seem like less light, the fill slider gives you better results. If I just go into opacity, it just doesn't look as good. It looks flatter. So I really want it to look like light. So the fill opacity is the way to go. What I can do now is select all three layers and put them into a group. Ctrl G, Command G on the Mac. And I can put them under the shoe maybe. And just move the lights right about here. And then transform them by pressing Ctrl T, Command T on the Mac. And just rotating it a little bit like so. I'm not sure if I'm 100% happy with the normal on the layer at the bottom. So I can try using one of the brightening blending modes to see if I get a better blend. And I think I'm going to use probably screen. That's normal. I think I like screen a little bit better. So I'm going to leave it at screen, and I can adjust the opacity, but I don't think I need it. And just to create a more interesting effect, I'm just going to press Ctrl T, Command T to transform, and just move that layer into another spot so that it's not the same. No, so it's not exactly aligned with the other layer, so we get different highlights. And I'll bring that fill opacity back up. And what I'm doing here live as I'm talking to you, I'm just fine-tuning the image, just trying to figure out what looks best. And as I've mentioned so many times, that's really where the magic happens. When you start seeing how things work, and then maybe you move something up or down and fine-tune a little bit. So you are gonna have to spend some time on your image and fine-tune it to give it the look that you want. What I'm gonna do now is add this layer called Sparks. I'll enable it so that you can see it. Oops, I accidentally moved my toolbar. I didn't want to move my toolbar. I'll enable this Sparks layer. See that? These sparks. And I'll just make them larger. Control T, Command T to transform. I'll make them larger. I can rotate them. I can do anything I want. So I'm just going to place the sparks right here, right in the heel. Right about here. And I can change the blending mode to screen. And if you can still see the background, that's because the background wasn't completely white. Screen keeps bright pixels and it hides black. So if you still see the background, that means the background wasn't completely black. So you can go into Image, Adjustment, Levels, and then you can start adjusting the levels. See that? See that when you start adjusting the levels, the background disappears? And you're left only with that those sparks. And you can start adjusting the sparks, or you can start duplicating the sparks. If you hold the Alt key while the move tool is selected, that's the Option key in the Mac, you can click and drag to duplicate the sparks. So I'm going to put the sparks on the other side just to make it seem as if both sides of the shoe have sparks coming out. So what I'm going to do now is take the this one, group number 1, and I'm just going to just move it around and place it wherever I need to. Also, I can press Control E, Command E on the Mac and just merge it into one layer if I need to, but I'm not sure if I like that effect. I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to distort it. So I can distort it several ways. I can distort it by selecting just one of these lights and just going into Edit, Puppet Warp, and just click to create these points, and then click and drag on the points, and I can, move them around if I need to. So if I want to give it a little bit of an angle, I can. It's up to you exactly how you want to distort them, or if you want to distort them at all. I feel that this is just a little too bright, so I will also bring down the opacity, the fill opacity on these guys. They're just a little too bright. And now that I'm looking at them, I think I'm going to add more contrast so that they're not so white. So Image, Adjustment, Levels, and I can adjust the contrast of those things. And Again, just fine tune the image as much as you need to get the results that you want. Something like that. And just keep fine tuning. I gotta get going now because we're finishing up with the stream. As you can see, you can just keep adding and adding and adding to your layers. I probably spend a little more time working on these highlights. For example, I can create a new layer and just paint with white back here just to create a bright highlight, whoops, with a soft brush. Like that, and change the blending mode by double clicking the layer, changing it to color dodge, unchecking transparency shapes layers, and then adjusting the fill from here. So a lot of fine tuning, guys. We're running a little late. I gotta go, but just keep fine tuning the image. Don't forget to go into the Discord page, Discord, and submit your work. The link is right up above my head. And make sure that you submit your work right on here. It's been awesome talking to you guys today. I will be back again tomorrow for the final challenge. So I hope to see everyone back tomorrow. Thank you so much for being with me today. I'll be seeing you guys on Discord. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye, guys.